after about 10 minutes of looking at the Ruby source, I realized why it is I wanted to get away from Ruby. You know, I spent 15 years writing small talk applications, and I'm not going to do, I mean, Ruby is just kind of small talk with curly braces. So anyway, so Vagabond, it's like Vagrant, but it's not. For those of you who don't know about Vagrant, basically it's a set of command line tools that allow you to manage the life cycle of virtual machines. And if you've used Vagrant, then you'll see it. Or if you haven't used Vagrant, think of typing a command like Vagrant, create or Vagrant start, and there's a descriptor file, which is actually a bit of Ruby source code in the current directory. It goes and executes it, which causes a virtual machine to be launched. So again, why is it that I don't like Vagrant? The main reason is that if you get into it, they kind of confuse the instance of a virtual machine with its prototype. So if you have two copies of the same virtual machine that are from the same box file, things get a little bit confusing if you're in the same directory. If you're in different directories, it's no big deal. We also, and I should say that the Vagabond project comes from some work we did for a customer who wanted this integrated into a web service. So we have a Node.js web service that, as a byproduct of receiving and processing requests, it spawns virtual machines doing weird things. And a couple little security nets. But by far the main reason that I recoded Vagrant in JavaScript was that I was trying to get away from Ruby. So this is just an example of how you might use it. You have the Vagabond command, and you say init, and that's going to generate a JSON file in your current directory, which describes all of the features of the virtual machine it wants to start. What you can see here is that vagabond.json, that's the standard name for the Vagabond JSON file, is that we're going to have a host name called Helium. It's going to use this. Whoops, that's a mistake. That shouldn't be. It's usually going to be 192.168.56.2. That's like the default. And that's because if people have used VirtualBox, you may be aware that the internal only virtual network defaults to 192.168.56.0. It's a network. And so this is the OVA. Currently we download standard VirtualBox OVAs. That's probably going to change in the future. And here's a user. So I'm describing, so what the init function does is it goes, and if it can figure out what your username is, it slams it in there, and if it can find an SSH key for you, it slams it in there. And that's like tilde.ssh / ID _ RSA .pub. So that's your public key, it's not your private key, nobody freak out. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you're going to create it and launch it. So we go create launch. And there's another thing missing, user. You have to say create launch in user. And what that does is it creates the virtual machine, launches the virtual machine, and then it sends a request that says create this user with this SSH key in its authorized keys file. And so as soon as you do that, you can just do SSH and then Vagabond IP, and it will tell you the IP address of the virtual machine described by the JSON file in the current directory. So that's basically it. Oh yes, we also have a web interface. So if you don't like, if there are people in your organization who don't like command lines, this is, we've been building sample node development virtual machines for like 4 years. And this is the standard API. So we just slammed it into our default OVAs that we refer people to. So you can do this. You can sit here and type in your name, username, password, hit return. There's your user. So if you don't want to use a user that's like you, that that's the username info that it harvested from your account. You use like a test account, you can do that. You can go through here. You can create multiple users. Also, one of the things that I really like is to do clusters, because all of our environments that we need to test have multiple machines, like it was, 4 or 5, internet-facing proxies, a couple app servers, and a persistence tier in the back. And so what we'll usually do is we'll have a minimum of 3 machines we want to test, like the front end, the application, and the application layer, and the database. So in this example, Helium is the front end, Lithium is the logic, business logic server, and Oxygen is the persistence tier. You can probably figure this out by looking at it, but the default is it creates this user on these 2 machines, and it says, oh, hey, look, there's more different users on Oxygen, so it creates those users on this virtual machine, and it uses a different FBA. And then, once you've done your testing, it's time to tear down. You go shut down and destroy. You don't have to destroy it if you don't want to. And then I play adventure games. Right, so if you want to give this a try, it's an NPM package. So you can just install Vagabond, you can clone it. It's surprisingly little code. So don't freak out if there's, it's only like 200 lines of code. All of the heavy lifting is done by VirtualBox. And there's a couple things that we're going for in the future. We have a web interface that I'm working on that I wasn't able to finish this week that will allow you to do things like configure clusters of users, like test user 1, test user 2, test user 3, that kind of thing, and then either send it directly to a cluster of machines or store it in that file, in that vagrant.json file. The other thing, and actually it's funny, this project actually started by us doing ARM on Meadhbh, and that we just got approval from our customer that we wrote this for to throw that interface into the public project. So those of you who do development on ARM appliances like I do, that might be of interest to you. And this is actually how we do all of our testing internally. We'll just create a virtual machine of our appliance. Okay, and so you can read slides just as well as I can. Basically, it's Vagrant with JavaScript, re-implemented in JavaScript. That's basically it. So, questions, comments?
So, do you use the VirtualBox APIs to connect it with VirtualBox? Or?
Right. So right now, it's specific to VirtualBox, but on a different branch, we have kind of a provider subscriber model where you can do VirtualBox or Meadhbh, and those are the 2 that we're starting with. So, and when we push that, you'll be able to define your own if you wanted to use Zen or whatever else you want to use.
So, how's the feature parity with between Vagrant and Vagabond?
Well, Vagrant, I have to admit, I really only used a couple features of Vagrant, so I can't really necessarily be say that I'm an expert in it, but it's also slightly different. Like for instance, we have another set of tools that are in a different package that help you, create, menus or admin interfaces. Vagrant just doesn't ever do. In terms of basic functionality, it's all there. Some of the more advanced functionality, like support for VMware. We don't really use VMware. So if you use VMware, and if people are interested in it, we'd probably eventually do it. Or if you want to do the code, we'll integrate it in. I'm not looking to do too much more work than we really need to. But yeah, also the teleportation stuff works mostly. It's kind of flaky, so I took it out of the main branch and trying to do some more testing. But about 98% of the time, you can teleport. Something which I don't think Vagrant does. So it does all of the core functionality of Vagrant is covered. Some of the corner cases probably aren't, and then we probably have a little bit of extra functionality. That's how I would say that.
Any plans to do like Vagrant and maybe create a site where you got base boxes hosted somewhere?
Well, this is a very good question. We internally, so I work for a company that's a consulting company, right? So we get paid by the hour. We're not really a product company, and so if there's anybody here from Oracle or Amazon or someone or GitHub who could, donate space, because it's like when we were doing testing, like our net bandwidth budget was just like destroyed by about 10 people doing testing over the last month. And it's like, oh crap, we have to, move some of these like base boxes onto content distribution network. We haven't done that yet, so we're going to do that first. Figure out a cheap way to get a CDN. So if anybody knows a cheap CDN for open source projects, let me know. But yeah, I would love to. It's like, but it's probably not going to happen in the next 3 or 4 months. Oh, and also, but the main thing is that they are currently, we're using regular VirtualBox OVAs, and there is kind of an OVA market, like virtualboxes.com, or that might be one. So, there.
So since you don't like Ruby, are you going to port Chef anytime soon?
No. Do you want me to? I don't know.
Yeah.
No. I've been using Ansible, actually. I love Ansible, and it's like, I hate YML with a passion, but I put up with it for Ansible. So, probably not. Unless you want to pay me. Did I mention the fact that I get paid by the hour? Very good. I think that's the last slide. Yeah. Okay.
Any more questions? No? Thank you.